a huge welcome to everybody online and in the room to this event on advancing disability inclusion for building resilience. My name is Ági Veres and I'm the director of UNDP. And we really wanted to organize this event with some of our key partners and those who are working in this area, because I do believe that especially in Geneva, we cover a lot of topics, but there are a few very, very important themes that we don't pay enough attention to. So our attempt was to really bring this to the forefront and not simply just the issue of disabilities and inclusion, but especially linking it to resilience building and thinking in contexts where it doesn't always come naturally as the first response, thinking about people with disabilities. So the purpose of this event is really to stimulate some discussions and a dialogue on disability inclusion in terms of success stories, good practices, listening to those working on these issues, the challenges that we can address, and what we can do within the international community, especially in Geneva, to do more on this topic. So we wanted to increase the visibility, but also to explore synergies and opportunities across the various partners and hear from member states, organizations working with persons with disabilities and the UN agencies and any other organization that is focusing on inclusive approaches. I think my take on these issues is also that we need to make sure that we work with other organizations that are not focusing on it, because that's our attempt, is not just to preach to the converted, but actually really work with those who may not think of these issues in their daily work. And also, secondly, that we're not just thinking about, for example, what we're covering in terms of accessibility for this meeting, for meetings when we're talking about disability, but this should be for any meeting so that we can reach out to those who are unable to participate in other dialogues and discussions because of some of the accessibility issues that are not there. So we have a wide set of stakeholders for this initiative. We bring together now not just organizations working with persons with disabilities and their representatives and the member state and UN agencies, but we have a much broader cohort that we work with, and we would like also to understand from you and from our distinguished speakers how we can work closer together with the key actors. One of the very interesting and I think very nice things about this event and what we're trying to do is how we can bring in some more visible and tangible kind of stories behind the scenes. So as you may have seen, we have done a digital exhibition of the finalist photographs. Joanna will brief us a little bit more on the submissions. We received more than 100 submissions and 8 finalists, and you will also get the chance to vote in addition to the selection process. As you can see, and our event is with facilitation services and accessibility. There's sign language interpretation and live captioning as well, and we hope to share it also accordingly afterwards. And those of you online, there is a Q&A session, so if you could channel all your questions in the Q&A box, and the moderators and panelists will bring it into the sessions. So with that short introduction, I really would like to introduce also our panel members that will come in during the event at various segments. First of all, Her Excellency Francisca Méndez Escobar, the Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of Mexico and Permanent Representative of Mexico. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation, and the Ambassador will start us off with a keynote speech. Then we have Mr. Petri Puhakka, Ambassador of Disability Inclusion from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Finland, who I believe we will have online. And then we will welcome, who will join us a little bit later, His Excellency Mr. Jeffrey Roach, Charge d'Affaires of the Permanent Mission of Australia. In addition, thank you very much for joining us as well from the Permanent Mission of India. Ms. Priyanka Chauhan, who is the Ambassador, Deputy Permanent Representative of India. And last but absolutely not least, my good friend and colleague Osla Tubrani, who is the UN Women Geneva Director, and we really thank you for the cooperation for co-organizing this event with us, and we're really looking forward to further cooperation on this. So with that, I think I hand over the word to you, Osnat, for some introductory remarks, and then we will continue with our panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Agi, UNDP team, and good morning, everyone, and welcome to this event. And it's a really great opportunity to share some reflections and we discuss how we can all together, the international community, advance disability inclusion for building resilience. This event is part of the commemoration of International Day of Persons with Disabilities on Sunday, and provides us with a great opportunity to explore the intersectionality of inequality based on disability, gender, and other forms of discrimination and exclusion. I can share with you that research shows that women with disabilities are 3 times more likely to be illiterate and 2 times less likely to be employed than men without disabilities. They are also severely underrepresented in decision-making, and fewer women lead organizations of people with disability. All of these inequalities contribute to increasing the exposure and vulnerability of women with disabilities to disasters and climate change. An intersectional focus can go a long way towards addressing the inequalities experienced by women and girls with disabilities. It is crucial to design programs and policies that effectively address not only discrimination based on disability, but the situation of those affected by all forms of compounded and intersecting forms of discrimination, including gender. In line with this, UN Women implements the Women's Resilience to Disasters program, which aims to render the lives and livelihoods of women and girls resilient to disasters. One of our program objectives is to promote the explicit consideration of gender and disability dimensions which define disaster risks. This includes also an intersectional focus on impacts, needs, and capacities, as well as the ability of women and girls with disabilities to meaningfully participate in disaster management and recovery. And if I can just add on a personal note, that I was living in the Pacific for many years, and as a humanitarian coordinator for several natural disasters, Tropical Cyclone Pam, Tropical Cyclone Winston, the floods disasters in Solomon Islands, this issue is just so important. There's so much to be done by ensuring that women are really involved, and I think my colleagues here can speak more about that program later. But I want to say that in this context, UN Women closely collaborates with civil society organizations that support women and girls with disabilities to have their voices heard. And I'm very pleased that we have some of our most valued partners who are carrying out this important work together with us, who will share their experience today. And we will hear from one of UN Women's partner organizations in the Pacific on how we can address the intersectional risks of women and girls with disability in a region that, as I mentioned, really suffers a lot from climate change. And so I really want to thank you for all the critical contributions today. And let me conclude by reminding us that the midterm review of the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction recognizes that the full, equal, and meaningful participation and leadership of women and girls with disabilities is vital for building their and everyone's resilience. So I really hope that we will leverage this, all of these findings to ensure that women and girls with disabilities are enabled to play greater roles in disaster risk reduction and climate action. And with that, I thank you. I cannot stay for the entire event, but I have my colleagues Rachel Steinbach and Toshi Nakamura who are with me here today and will contribute to the discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Osnat. And thank you for giving a little bit broader introduction to the topic. And one of the reasons why we also wanted to bring us together today is because we want to have a real discussion on the meaningful inclusion and resilience building. Because I think, you know, many actors are working on this topic, and a lot of the times it is handled as kind of a standalone issue. So we are dealing with resilience building, and then we're dealing with disability inclusion for resilience building. And, you know, until we actually bring that together and it becomes kind of a natural way of thinking about all of these issues on the ground when for example, disasters happens or in conflict situations, I think we cannot talk about real and meaningful inclusion. So along these lines, I have been really inspired by Ambassador on what this really means. And then you're leading the Friends of Group on a related topic. And I think, you know, it would be really good to hear from you to see how do you see that and how we can really work towards that meaningful and non-tokenized inclusion when we're talking about disabilities and resilience. So with that, I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, my dear Agi Veris, UNDP Geneva Director, Ms. Osna Lubrani, UN Women Geneva Director, my dear DPR of India. Hello, good morning. Dear colleagues, fellow panelists, and members of the public, including those who are joining us virtually. Good morning, everybody. I would like to warmly thank you, UNDP, UN Women, and all the co-organizers for this event for inviting me today. It is an honor for me to share this hybrid panel with Agi Veris, Osna Lubrani, and the distinguished Ambassador for Disability Inclusion of Finland, His Excellency Petri Puhaka. I think 3 weeks ago, Agi, when you invited me to this important event, I was totally agree because we need more different perspective on how to approach to person with disability and a real inclusion. And we both have personal and professional experience that I think could contribute to see the persons with disability in different way and from different perspectives. As you know, on December 3rd this year, we commemorate the International Day of Persons with Disability under the main theme, United in Action to Rescue and Achieve the Sustainable Development Goals for, with, and by persons with disabilities. On that occasion, Secretary General Guterres underscored that truly sustainable development for persons with disabilities requires a laser-like focus on their needs and rights, not only as beneficiaries, but as active contributors across social, economic, and political life. This means that persons with disabilities should have a seat in all decision-making tables, in line with the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. In this framework, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights has launched a campaign focusing on disability rights-based care and support, economy, and systems, which stresses that persons with disabilities, when they need care and support, should receive it in a manner that fully respects their will, autonomy, and dignity, and that persons with disabilities are also, in many instances, care providers. More importantly, they should participate on an equal basis with others in any decision concerning the design and implementation of care and support measures. These two topics, the SDGs and care and support, link perfectly with the main issue we are discussing today, resilience and inclusion. Resilience is our ability to overcome adversity and adapt positively to change. In our quest for a resilient future, we must acknowledge that and address the barriers that persons with disability continue to face for their full participation in society. The inclusion of persons with disabilities is not only a matter of social justice, but also a crucial component if we want to build stronger, more resilient communities. In Mexico, we have developed a broad range of public policies to support and empower persons with disability and other groups in vulnerable situations. Our sectoral program for well-being is an overarching set of policies that seeks to consolidate the rights and well-being of the population with a specific focus on the most disadvantaged group, guided by the principle enshrined in Agenda 2030 of leaving no one behind. Our targeted action include, among others, a permanent program of pension for persons with disabilities, which has been elevated to constitutional rank, a guide for public action on accessible websites, and a good practices manual for the inclusion of persons with disabilities in the judicial power at the federal level, which has designed it in coordination with the UN. Furthermore, our new National Code for Civil Procedure recognizes at all levels and all parts in the country the full legal capacity of persons with disabilities, which is a prerequisite to their full participation in society legally and de facto. The new code triggers the need to provide the necessary support to persons with disabilities so that they can fully exercise their legal capacity. We need persons with disability and their representative organization to be active agents in our efforts to build resilience. For that purpose, we must step our efforts to tear down existing physical, social, legal, and cultural barriers which hinder their participation. Today's reality, in which we are facing extreme meteorological phenomena and natural disasters and derived from climate change, as well as major destruction, injuries, and loss of life due to wars around the globe, we are called to recommit our efforts to fully include persons with disabilities in our humanitarian action as a matter of priority. Mexico is firmly committed to the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, and my government submitted its mid-term review report in 2022. The report highlights the publication of mandatory official Mexican standards regarding prevention and security conditions for persons with disabilities and civil protection action during emergencies or disaster situations. I'm sure that much remains to be done to achieve societies that are both fully inclusive and resilient. I hope that through multi-stakeholders dialogues like today's events, we will be able to identify and share best practices and lessons learned that will bring us closer to that goal. I thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to your comments and questions. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Francisca. To get us started and giving us a little bit more context for our discussion. With that, I also would like to invite His Excellency Mr. Petri Puhakka, the Ambassador for Disability Inclusion from Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Finland, who is online with us. I hope you can hear us, and the floor is yours, Petri. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope that my connection stays, as I seem to be having some problems here. So, like, if I'm dropping off.
I think we have lost.
That happened now. I hope that I will be staying online. There's clearly some kind of a technical issue here, but okay. So, Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, let me begin by saying that I'm really happy to have the possibility to be speaking here today in this timely and important event. Ensuring that persons with disabilities can fully exercise their rights is a prerequisite for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. And for this reason, rights of persons with disabilities are a priority in Finland's foreign and security policy, development cooperation, and humanitarian assistance. We firmly believe that active participation of persons with disabilities themselves is a cornerstone of disability inclusive development and humanitarian action. Organizations of persons with disabilities should be seen as valuable resources and agents of change, as they have comprehensive insights into what an inclusive approach actually means. Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, or CRPD, obliges states parties to the convention to ensure that all persons with disabilities are fully included and meaningfully participate in all activities that impact them. This is also very important to keep in mind in disaster risk reduction. The convention applies at all.
I think unfortunately we lost the ambassador. Are you with us?
Yes, I'm with you. Like, I can try again. I don't know exactly where I was cut off, but like, let me start with, I think would be somewhere here. Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, or CRPD, obliges states parties to ensure that all parties, persons with disabilities, are fully included and meaningfully participate in all activities that impact them. This is also very relevant to keep in mind in disaster risk reduction. The convention applies at all times and its provisions cannot be deferred. Which we know, persons with disabilities continue to be among those most impacted by disasters and more likely to be excluded from emergency preparedness, disaster reduction, and related decision-making processes. Research also shows that the mortality rate among persons with disabilities tends to be 2 to 4 times higher than among the normal, or like the rest of the population. It is therefore vital that disaster risk reduction and preparedness is designed from the start to be accessible and inclusive, so that the whole community can benefit and access support and services. The needs and rights of I hope I'm back. The needs and rights of persons with disabilities during emergencies, conflicts, and disease outbreaks are not yet fully understood and included in aid interventions. Unintentional discrimination still takes place due to lack of knowledge of disability, accessibility, and inclusion. Involvement of organization of persons with disabilities in planning, implementation, and monitoring of these interventions is too often limited or hardly existing. Disaster prevention and preparedness, let alone emergency response, do not properly cover persons with disabilities. Collaboration between aid agencies is often weak, even though improvements have been seen. As the global situation remains unstable with a growing number of emergencies, including phenomena of extreme weather, strengthening the resilience of persons with disabilities and OPDs in fragile contexts is all the more topical. At the recent Global Disability Summit, more than 170 commitments were made concerning situations in conflicts and crises, including a focus on climate change. One of Finland's commitments was to strengthen disability-inclusive disaster risk reduction through improved representation and participation of organizations of persons with disabilities, including organizations of women with disabilities. In practice, we are trying to support and advocate for the participation of organizations of persons with disabilities and okay, I think I was noticing where I was cut off. So there is a clear need to speed up action to reduce disaster and climate-related risks and their disproportionate impact on persons with disabilities. System-level changes are needed This could be done, for example, through fast-track implementation of the Sendai framework in line with Article 11 of the CRPD, which obliges parties to ensure that protection and safety of persons with disabilities in situations of risk and humanitarian emergencies. We strengthen cooperation between all stakeholders, including organizations of persons with disabilities. We can take this important work forward and ensure that no one is left behind. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. And I also want to acknowledge and thank the support from the Permanent Mission of Finland in Geneva, and also, of course, the Permanent Mission of Mexico, and for the ambassadors to support our event. With that, I would like to hand it over to my colleague, Joanna, who is leading this initiative and who can introduce the rest of our panel and the rest of the discussions, and hopefully we can have a little bit of an interactive exchange as well on this topic. Joanna, over to you.
Thank you, Agi. Excellencies, colleagues, and friends of disability inclusion. My name is Ioana Creitaru. I work as Disaster Risk Reduction Program Specialist for UNDP, and I'm also focal point for disability inclusive disaster risk reduction. I'm very pleased to be moderating our panel today. It will be a hybrid panel. We have a number of speakers online as well as in the room. But before we do that, I would really like to invite you to take an illustrated journey of some of the topics we will be discussing today. And this happens in the context of a joint UNDP OCHA initiative to launch a photography competition to bring forward positive images of disability inclusion at work, where persons with disabilities, organizations of persons with disabilities, and generally people in the field are actually contributors and change makers. So with no further ado, I will ask my online moderators to screen the video. And let me just say that we will all need to pay a lot of attention to the photographs being described, as participants online will be able to vote using a Zoom poll that will be shown at the end of the video. And colleagues in the room have a nice sheet of paper with a QR code on the desks that you will be able to screen with your phone, and you will be able to pick your preferred photo. At the end of this event, we will also have the People's Choice Award. So colleagues online, over to you.
The photography competition, Change Makers in Action, Building Disability Inclusive, Resilient Communities, was launched by UNDP and OCHA on the occasion of the 2023 International Day of Persons with Disabilities. The competition aimed to celebrate resilient, disability-inclusive communities and to showcase the role of persons with disabilities as agents of change. The theme for this year's International Day of Persons with Disabilities is United in Action, to rescue and achieve the Sustainable Development Goals for, with, and by persons with disabilities. Thus, the photography competition aimed to promote images of resilience and inclusion, both in development and in humanitarian contexts. My name is Daniel Hedak, and I am a humanitarian photographer and also one of the judges of this photo competition. I, on behalf of all the judges, wish to thank the participants who took their time to enter this contest. We received submissions from Albania to Vietnam and so many countries in between, and it was inspiring to go through the photographs and to see such wonderful scenes of inclusion from around the world. The submissions were judged on their technical and artistic qualities, as well as the relevance to the contest theme, as well as the agency displayed by the persons with disabilities photographed. In the end, there were 8 photographs that stood out from the rest. The first finalist is a photo submitted by Benung Oh of RTI International. The photo shows a young deaf girl, Linny Lin, aged 7, seated on the floor next to her grandmother. Both are taking part in an online class of Cambodian Sign Language. Accessible online, this course is especially prepared to support people with disabilities and their families so that at home, as well as in the community, they build resilience through inclusion and education. The second finalist is a photo by Esther Nsapu, which shows Venant Matabaro repairing shoes. The shoemaker is the father of 5 children and lives in Bukavu in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Venant is among the many persons with disabilities who support himself and his family through labor, despite increased difficulties in accessing work. The third finalist is by Dina Ibrahimova of Selka TV. Pictured is a young girl from Ukraine smiling joyfully while holding colored strings of paper in an arts and crafts class, organized as part of a Culture Without Barriers program. This initiative offers children with Down syndrome a creative activity to enjoy and support their development. Participating in art activities leads to positive effects such as self-confidence, relationship building, and a sense of belonging for all individuals. The fourth finalist is Solya Onavong of World Education Laos. Their photo shows an older man with a prosthetic leg tending to his land as part of his daily routine. The photo showcases that persons with disabilities of all ages can indeed enhance community resilience through agriculture. The fifth finalist is a photograph by Mahadir Fahad of the Center for Disability in Development in Bangladesh. It shows Kajol Rekha, a woman with a physical impairment, seated in a wheelchair, holding a community meeting. She has faced stigma in her community and used to mostly stay at home. But Kajol is determined not to allow her impairment and the attitude of others to keep her from making a difference. Now, she works with community members and leaders to develop community-based, disability-inclusive disaster risk management initiatives. The sixth finalist is by Rawa Kadur and shows a man from Syria cleaning the streets with a broom while holding his balance on his crutches. This man is part of a Cash for Work project promoting social integration and inclusive employment. Participation in the work market offers persons with disabilities equal possibilities, encourages inclusion, and develops community bonds, leading to a positive impact for all involved. The seventh finalist is a photograph submitted by Salim Algirk of the Shafek organization. It shows a young man with vision loss from Idlib, Syria, weaving a basket. Their crafts are then displayed at the Craft Exhibition for the Blind, organized by the Shafek organization's Makani Community Center. This exhibition provides an opportunity for persons with disabilities to showcase their talents, which boosts inclusion and social cohesion. The eighth and final finalist is a photograph submitted by Solya Onavong of World Education Laos. The picture shows a grandfather with a hearing aid seated outside a home, engaged in conversation with family. By using a hearing aid, this grandfather from Laos with a hearing difficulty can communicate effectively with his loved ones and engage in social activities. This promotes inclusion, independence, and emotional well-being, all of which contribute to resilience. The photo highlights the importance of assistive technology in overcoming barriers. And there you have it, the 8 finalists for the Changemakers in Action photography competition. But which are the top 3 photos? These will be revealed in just a little while, so stay tuned.
Excellent. So participants online, please use, we need to mute there. Please use your Zoom poll that will show on your screens. Excellent. Take your time. And participants in the room, please scan your codes so that we can all participate to the People's Choice Award that will be offered at the end of the session. So let me use this time to turn our attention from this visual journey that is, by the way, presented in a virtual reality powered digital exhibit online. We will share the link to this so that everybody can access the digital exhibition. We're also hoping that next year in Geneva, we will be able to showcase some of these beautiful photographs in a live event happening in May together with our partners from OCHA. But let me turn all of our attention from this beautiful illustrated journey and into a discussion where we have brought together voices from across the world, from different organizations, from NGOs, organizations of persons with disabilities, UN agencies, and obviously member states, to showcase their examples, good practices, successes, but also talk about the challenges and the solutions lying ahead. So our panel today will be divided into 2 parts so we can accommodate a variety of voices. We will start with 4 speakers online. We will display them on screen very soon. They come from Pakistan, Ethiopia, Latvia, Bangladesh. And we will also have a beautiful video from the field, from OPDs, speaking in local languages about some of these issues. So with that, we will be closing the first part of the panel. We will open for questions and answers and interactive discussion with participants online and in the room. And then the second part of the panel will involve our colleagues sitting with us here in the room in Geneva to further explore some of the opportunities and some of the entry points for advancing this agenda. I also wanted to mention that participants online have a question and answer box on Zoom. Please feel free to drop your questions. We have online moderators that will bring to the room a couple of questions when we get to the interactive session. Unfortunately, we cannot open the floor online. However, the questions that will be addressed in the question and answer box will be also answered by our disability inclusion expert that's submitted at the end of the event. Good, so with this, I would like to invite Ms. Abia Akram, who is a disability rights activist and founder of the National Forum of Women with Disabilities in Pakistan. Abia, we are honored to have you with us today. You are the recipient of Women's International Network for Disaster Risk Reduction Leadership Award 2023. Congratulations for this amazing achievement. We're very proud to have you with us today. Now, let's start maybe with the first question to you, Abia. We are keen to hear your reflections about the success factors for the leadership of women and girls with disabilities in activities that promote disability inclusion as well as resilience building. So Abia, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk today in this distinguished panelists and all honorable ministers and also the representatives all over the world. Thank you very much. It's such an honor for me. Unfortunately, I was not able to be part in person, but when we talk globally on the inclusion of persons with disabilities, it's really important to talk from the resilience perspective, because we know the inclusion of the transformative promise of leaving no one behind have given so much hope to persons with disabilities in the form of sustainable development goals. 16% of the total population was envisioning that the huge shift will be there, where persons with disabilities will celebrate their diversities, where persons with disabilities will be included in the transformative agenda. And we have good examples as well, but it's very unfortunate. The problem of the scale is so huge that it will take a lot of interventions from the state, from the UN, from the international organizations, and particularly the organizations of persons with disabilities, so we can create an inclusive response and the environment. We also talk about the inclusion of women and girls with disability, because we have seen 10 to 15% of the total population of persons with disability, and 50% of them are women and girls with disability. They are the one who are first one in the disaster and the humanitarian response, the first one to be sexually harassed and get the gender-based violence. They are the first one who were excluded from the response. And it's very unfortunate, like women and girls with disabilities were not finding that responsive of the policies. The policies are very quiet on the response of women and girls with disability. And at the same time, when we talk in the humanitarian context, the families and the parents, they left their daughters because they thought they can took their expensive things with them that is going to help them. So it is critically important how we are reviewing our strategies, our policies from the context of the Sustainable Development Goals, from the context of the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability, and also highlighting that resilient voices of those women and girls with disability who have been witnessing these disasters, who have been witnessing all those challenges in their lives. We, when we started the work, we just like talk more with the leadership of women and girls with disability and push the agenda in a systematic way and advocate to the policy makers, and at the same time the key stakeholders, the police department, health department, on all the relevant response services to create that ecosystem which is responsive to the needs of women and girls with disability. We also established during the flood and the earthquake and all those emergency responses, we have developed Aging Disability Diversity Task Force, because we thought like it's very important to have the seat on the table. If the voices of persons with disabilities or the organizations of persons with disabilities will not be included, they will be again left behind. And we also talk about the intersectionality approach, because it's important to talk about transgender with disability, older people with disabilities, and the young people. Youth is a huge number, which is completely untapped population. So how we talk about that? There are always like missing gaps that we have seen in the Asia Pacific region, in the global context as well. The numbers and the segregation of the data. If you have the exact numbers and talk about those who are not getting access to the services, access to the justice, or all those infrastructure on all the conducive environment, it's very important to have the data. And secondly, the allocation of the budget, because if you don't have the allocation of that specific budget, then again those persons with disabilities will not be systematically included in the conversations. The third point which I want to highlight about the inclusion and the policy reforms as well is very important, because from the policies perspective, if you see that change, that will take a huge impact on the lives of persons with disabilities. disability. We have to review from the perspective of the resilience, those women with disabilities all over the world who have been experiencing and working from decades to contribute in the disaster response. We have the toolkits available, the services available. It's just like to transform them in the local context where we can bring that positive change in the lives of persons with disability. Today, we are observing the International Day, which is talking about the Sustainable Development Goals by, for, and with persons with disabilities. And I just want to highlight that it's very important to include women and girls with disability at all levels. And they could be the first one who could respond and advocate about their own rights. The third point, the fourth one is very important to talk about the inclusion from the perspective of the global, but at the same time, the local perspective, the clear that is movement behind the gender movement and the disability movement. And if we work together in these two areas, we can see the positive change in the lives of person with disability. I'm really grateful for all the speakers before me and all the organizers for organizing this conversation today, but we have a long way to go and we cannot wait for another decade to see the change. We have to take our commitments today with all the stakeholders so we can jointly create a positive change in the lives of persons with disability. I would say nothing about us without us. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Abia, and thank you so much for this wonderful call to action. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Melaku Tekle, who is Disability Inclusion Manager at Light Up for the World Ethiopia. Melaku, Light of the World has just launched the Disability Inclusion Academy in Ethiopia. And this is an innovative capacity building initiative that has actually been spearheaded across the world. We're very curious to know how this capacity building initiative is contributing to resilience building by empowering and supporting the role of persons with disabilities. So Melaku, over to you.
Thank you, Anna. Happy International Day of Persons with Disabilities. Excellencies, good afternoon, everyone. I'm joining from Ethiopia, Light for the World Country Office. Today, I will talk briefly about our Disability Inclusion Academy, where we build the capacity of young persons with disabilities systematically so that they will be able to support organizations with disabilities to become more disability inclusive. In most cases, programs and organizations want to be inclusive. They want to try to address the needs and aspirations of persons with disabilities, but they don't know how. So the Disability Inclusion Academy is designed to respond to that need. This model was first created in Uganda by Light for the World within our livelihood resilience program, but through time, it was expanded into several countries like Sudan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Ghana, Senegal, including my country, Ethiopia. In Ethiopia, we have piloted this academy with the support from Austrian Development Agency as part of a program we call Cross Ethiopia, which is aimed at increasing the capacity of persons with disabilities for resilience and self-reliance in the post-COVID world. The Disability Inclusion Academy is like a fellowship program from 3 to 9 months. It has also, initial training of trainers, then a fellowship program which spans, throughout the months. During this time, we systematically build the capacity of young persons with disabilities by coaching, mentorship, and ongoing support. You might wonder why we are trying to engage youth with disabilities as disability inclusion facilitators. We call them DIFs. One is, it's important for us, it has self-advocacy element in it, because with the motto of nothing about us without us, we believe involving persons with disabilities in decisions and programs that affect themselves. So that is one thing. The other is, we think that persons with disabilities have, they have the value of lived experience of disability, which means halfway to addressing the challenges they face. If we add some technical knowledge and capacity, this will position them to address practical challenges they face in their localities. The other is also, in most cases around the world, as you know, persons with disabilities are considered as unproductive segment of the society, quote unquote that, but we believe showcasing the ability of young persons with disabilities in action will have a lasting impression, for instance, in a certain training while building the capacity of partners on disability inclusion, or providing disability awareness training, while a person with disability standing there and providing the training, that would create a long lasting impression on the audience. So DIFs, disability inclusion facilitators, they engage in a number of activities, like they build relationships, they mobilize persons with disabilities to benefit from resilience building programs, inclusive livelihood programs, humanitarian action programs. Also within their communities, they act as role models for other persons with disabilities, other young persons with disabilities. They engage in awareness raising trainings. They also even monitor change, also engaging with partners on the ground. So this is all about what we are trying to do in Ethiopia and around the world, learning from our first disability inclusion academy created in Uganda by Light for the World. And we are looking at advancing this in more programs and more countries. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Malaku, and I really appreciate the focus on the youth as change makers in action. Thank you for that. Let us move now to our next speaker. I would like to invite Ms. Gunta Anka, who is Vice President of the European Disability Forum and the chairperson of the Latvian umbrella body for disability organizations. Welcome, Gunta. We're very happy to have you with us today. As you are the Vice President of the European Disability Forum, which is an independent non-governmental organization that brings together representative organizations of persons with disabilities from across Europe, we are keen to hear your reflections about the status of disability inclusion across your constituency. So Gunta, we know that the European Disability Forum has recently released a report looking at national disaster risk reduction policies and the level of integration of disability inclusion. And so we would like to know more, what are the challenges that member states in this region are faced with, but also what are some of the innovations and opportunities that they are seizing to advance this agenda. Over to you, Gunta.
Okay, hello, good morning, everybody. Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, dear friends, because I'm sure many of you I've met somewhere before. As you said already, in 2021, which is 2 years ago, we have started our cooperation with European Forum for Disaster Risk Reduction. And together we prepare some kind of a review on disaster risk reduction and civil protection policies in 55 different countries of Europe and Central Asia region. We try to understand how disability inclusive those policies are. So I'd like to tell a bit more about our review and about the results of the review. Of course, I would like to start with some positive results. And positive results shows that we have some countries which are very open and which are very happy to include disability issues in a disaster risk reduction. For example, I can tell you a bit more about Italy. Italy has a civil protection code. This civil protection code refers to persons with disabilities which need a special attention during risk reduction operations. We are talking about fire and rescue services. So it's a good example, which is not in so many countries, but still in some countries, it works very well. But we are also really sorry to say that in general, in many countries, there is something like an ad hoc activity. So it means when something is happened or where something is happened, we are trying to do something for individual cases, and it's not a part of the system, and it's not a part of the process. We still should talk more about right-based approaches in all those activities, in those processes, because quite often people with disabilities have been seen like vulnerable groups. They are not like a part of the partners they can communicate with. They are not like a key stakeholders. So in our review, we can see that only 6 countries across the region prioritize protection of children with disabilities in their key actions. We are talking about situation of risk management and humanitarian emergency situations. Only 5 countries talking about UNCRPD, article number 11, about rights of persons with disabilities, to include in the national policies, in strategies and in actions, people with disabilities and their needs. I would like just to tell you that our review has been done in Russian and in English. So it means not all countries were able to answer to all of those questions. And some countries answer in a very short way. So we see that maybe it could be a problem of language too. We see as one of the problems that data about people with disabilities are not disaggregated. Local municipalities don't know where people with disabilities are living. They don't know what kind of support do they need in the situation of disaster. In many countries, people with disabilities and their organizations are not included in an everyday communication about how those plans will be developed and how those plans could be much more inclusive. We also see that there are lack of communication, and the problem of communication is about accessibility of communication. There are no information. There are no information in accessible forwards. There are no accessible services in many places. Of course, I would like also to say about some good examples. For example, in Serbia, in Armenia, and also in Italy, as I said before, people with disabilities and their organizations are very actively involved in a decision-making about disaster management. The organizations also are involved in the trainings. So it means they have the possibility to talk directly about their needs and the way how to support them in a best way. Of course, we can say that our review has been done almost 2 years ago. And during those 2 years, 2022 and also almost 2023, European Disability Forum produced quite many policy papers on this issue. And we are using those policy issues in a different policy papers in different countries, like for example, in Romania and Lithuania, to involve organizations of people with disabilities in a process of decision-making, to let them work together with government to make those policies more inclusive. We also would like to say that we have some kind of achievements, because European Forum on Risk Reduction Risks prepared a roadmap for 2021-2030, and this roadmap is much more inclusive than it was before. They are following with Sendai principles, and they are using these guidelines in all kinds of trainings and all kinds of activities they are developed. And also, our organization, European Disability Forum, has quite a lot of resources you can use online. You can ask us about it. So if we are to build resilience and sustainable society for all, and persons with disabilities must be part of decision-making process. And there is a mandate what has been given by UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Nothing about us without us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gunta. And we appreciate your call around agency and going beyond picturing persons with disabilities as endless victims and actually as change makers in action. So thank you for that message. I would like with this occasion to invite Mr. Atif Sheikh, who is the chair of Disability Inclusive Disaster Risk Reduction Network. Atif is connecting with us also from Pakistan. And we are interested, Atif, to learn more about what are the lessons in designing resilience building projects and initiatives that promote the meaningful participation and leadership of persons with disabilities, as well as their representative organizations. So Atif, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning there, all the people sitting in that room, and good afternoon for the rest of the people who are attending this meeting from my part of the world. So it's afternoon here. I would like to thank UNDP and all the organizers of this very important event for bringing together.
Petri Puhacker has left the meeting. Petri Puhacker has joined the meeting.
Learnings from the policies and practices, especially when the world has just observed International Day of Persons with Disabilities on this Sunday. In context to the theme of this year's International Day of Persons with Disabilities, we have to focus on the intersectionality of disability to ensure that we are counting everyone. Like most of the people in the marginalized communities, some in the ethnic communities, transgender, or women with disabilities, they are still uncounted population of the world. They are still invisible in the community. So we have to take care of the intersectionality so that everyone is counted, and while we are approaching to the implementation of sustainable development goals. Let me introduce a little bit about the Disability Inclusive DRR network, and then I will build upon the discussion which my previous panelist has said. I will build on that. Disability Inclusive DRR network is a consortium of like-minded organizations of persons with disabilities and mainstream and disability-focused development and humanitarian organizations. And our collective aim is to secure the active participation and meaningful contribution of persons with disabilities in DRR policies and practices, especially in the post-Sendai framework scenario. According to one of the studies conducted by Disability Inclusive DRR Network, out of this, all people with disabilities, overall people with disabilities who are living in the world, out of them, 85% of persons with disabilities have never participated in any community disaster management or risk reduction processes in their community, not in the decision making, not in the policy practices, or in any kind of training. And today, if we will not count them, they will remain living on the margin of the society, and their resilience will be challenged. I must acknowledge, before going into the detail, I must acknowledge our partners who have been supporting the network for implementation of a very significant project in the last few years. The title of the project was Putting Persons with Disabilities at the Center of the Humanitarian Preparedness and Response. And this project was implemented in Bangladesh, Indonesia, Myanmar, Niger, Zimbabwe, Uganda, Colombia, and Nicaragua. In all of these countries, the objective was to engage people with disabilities and address the impact of disaster, disproportionate the impact of disaster on persons with disabilities, which is often overlooked. And marginalized people with disabilities face multiple of barriers, especially physical.
Petri Puhakar has left the meeting. Petri Puhakar has joined the meeting.
So by advocating for the active participation of persons with disabilities in DRR policies and practices, we have tried to address these issues and create more equitable outcomes in disaster situations. We have brought together multiple stakeholders from the diversified backgrounds, including development organizations, OPDs, the disaster management authorities, so that they can include people with disabilities at the grassroots level in disaster management planning. And I'm very happy to share that out of these successful implementation of this project, we have seen one of the pictures is shortlisted in the competition today. I'm not going to highlight that picture, but hopefully, let's finger crossed, if it wins, then I will mention again. So these interventions in this country by Disability Inclusive DRR Network, and which was actually led by 4 major organizations: International Disability Alliance, CBM, Christopher Blendon Mission, and Center for Disability and Development in Bangladesh, and ASB, which is a German organization based in working in Indonesia. So all and Martyrs International. These were the partners who implemented this pilot project on disability inclusive DRR. And through this project, we have a number of case studies, which are success stories, which can be replicated, which can be shared at the global level for the policy making. Plus, it can be shared at the other countries, even in the global south, for to learn from them, to include in the disability practices. One key outcome which I would like to highlight in this answering to that question, that through engagement of people with disabilities and through setting a footprint of inclusion in these areas, we have seen that the disaster management authorities are willing to consult with people with disabilities in the disaster-prone areas.
Petri Puhakar has joined the meeting.
And through their inclusion, now they are planning to make some policy changes, which ensures that people with disabilities from diversified backgrounds, keeping in view the intersectionality, they are part of the processes for disaster preparedness and humanitarian responses. So in conclusion, I would like to highlight that this is the high time when the entire world is preparing for the impact of the climate change in coming years, and when the livelihood opportunities will be transformed, a lot of impact on the people living on the disaster-prone area, especially on the shores. It will have impact. It will impact not only people with disabilities, it will impact everyone. So at this high time, people with disabilities should be included in the policy-making preparedness processes for the humanitarian responses at the national level and at the regional and the global level. So through which is possible through sharing the learning from these practices of inclusion people with disabilities in the policy making processes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Atif. I would like also to mention that our panel speakers will remain with us throughout the session. So for online participants, please don't hesitate to drop your questions. Our panel members online will be happy to respond, at least to some of them. And we will also bring questions into the open session in a few minutes. Now, before we open the floor for our interactive discussion, I would like to showcase a few additional voices from the field in a beautiful video that has been shared with our partners from ASB, also from the Disability Inclusion Disaster Risk Reduction Network, as well as a video from the Pacific Disability Forum, facilitated by our partners at UN Women. So with this, I'm kindly asking our online facilitators to screen the video, and then we will be back to our interactive discussion.
Ako si Cora Clarin sa Cebu, Philippines. Ako ang kasamtangan nga convenor sa Cebu Disability Inclusive DRR Network.
Nama saya Sidik, saya dari Indonesia. Saya sebagai perwakilan dari Pokja Opdis, Sulawesi Tengah.
আসসালামু আলাইকুম, আমি নাজমুন হার আক্তার। আমি একজন শারীরিক প্রতিবন্ধী নারী। আমি বাগেরহাট জেলার শরণখোলা থানার উপকূলীয় অঞ্চলে বসবাস করি। আমাদের একটি দল আছে, আমাদের দলের নাম সততা স্বসহায়ক দল। আমাদের দলে 15 জন সদস্য আছে। আমি এই দলের একজন সাধারণ সম্পাদিকা হিসেবে দায়িত্ব পালন করতেছি।
Ang among mga kasinatian, sa dihang nakig-uban kami sa among gobyerno ug sa CSOs, isip among partner sa among mga programa para sa tao nga may kakulian, naghatag ka namo og dakong hagit. Apan kanang hagit nga among nasinati, amo kanang gihimo nga among kusog nga diin nakahimo gid kami og maayo nga relasyon diha sa among gobyerno nga isip sila adunay mandato sa paghimo sa mga programa para sa mga tawo nga may kakulian ug uban usab ang dakong suporta sa among mga CSOs. Ug kani nga positibo nga resulta, nakaangkon kami og mga maayo nga kahigayunan ug among naangkon ang among mga katungod.
আমাদের দলে 5 জন নিয়ে একটি কার্যনির্বাহী কমিটি আছে। কমিটিতে 3 জন নারী সদস্য, তাদেরকে অগ্রাধিকার দেওয়া হচ্ছে এবং আমাদের যে দলটি 15 জন সদস্যের মধ্যে অধিক সদস্যই হচ্ছে নারী এবং এই নারীদের কথায় গুরুত্ব দেওয়া হচ্ছে এবং আমরা এই দলটি পরিচালনা করে তারপর বিভিন্ন প্রশিক্ষণের মাধ্যমে, যেমন নারীরা সেলাই মেশিনের প্রশিক্ষণ পেয়েছে বা এখন কাজ করে উন্নয়নের দিকে যাচ্ছে এবং অনেকে কৃষি কাজ করতেছে এবং অনেকে হাঁস মুরগি পালন করে ডিম বিক্রি করে আমরা সঞ্চয় মানে আয় উন্নয়নের দিকে আমরা লাভবান হচ্ছি এবং সঞ্চয় জমা রাখি ডিম বিক্রি করতেছি, তারপরে যে হাঁস মুরগি পালন করতেছি, তারপরে অনেকে যারা সেলাই মেশিনের কাজ করতেছে, আবার যারা কৃষি কাজ করতেছে, এ থেকে যে আয় হচ্ছে এখান থেকে আমরা সঞ্চয় করতেছি এবং এ থেকে আমরা সবাই উদ্বৃত্ত হচ্ছি এবং সবার সঞ্চয় মনোভাব তৈরি। এখন আমাদের দুর্যোগ ঝুঁকি অধিকাংশেই কমে গেছে এবং সমাজের বিভিন্ন স্থানীয় জায়গাতে আমাদের পরিবেশগম্যতা বৃদ্ধি পেয়েছে। একটা সময় আমরা জানতাম না যে আসলে দুর্যোগের সময় আমরা প্রতিবন্ধী নারী বা পুরুষ হিসেবে যে আমাদের কি কাজ বা আমরা কোথায় যাব এসব কিছু জানতাম না। এখন বিভিন্ন প্রশিক্ষণের মাধ্যমে এখন কিন্তু আমরা জানি যে দুর্যোগ আসলে আমাদের কি কি করতে হবে, দুর্যোগের আগে কি করতে হবে, দুর্যোগ চলাকালীন সময় কি করতে হবে বা দুর্যোগের পরে কি করতে হবে। এখন কিন্তু আমরা ওয়ার্ড দুর্যোগ ব্যবস্থাপনা কমিটিতে সদস্য আছি, তারপরে ইউনিয়ন দুর্যোগ ব্যবস্থাপনা কমিটিতেও কিন্তু আমরা প্রতিবন্ধী নারী পুরুষরা অন্তর্ভুক্ত হতে পেরেছি।
Organisasi penyandang disabilitas hanya menjadi pelengkap atau hanya dijadikan sebagai pemenuhan representase dari kegiatan membangun ketangguhan. Karena itu, perlu peningkatan kapasitas di organisasi penyandang disabilitas yang bersifat teknis. Selain itu, juga perlu pelatihan terkait bagaimana manajemen, bagaimana pembuatan proposal, bagaimana monitoring, evaluasi, dan bagaimana menyusun budgeting dalam suatu program kemanusiaan yang diharapkan menjadikan organisasi penyandang disabilitas ke depannya dapat mengelola proyek sendiri tanpa perlu pendampingan secara terus-menerus oleh lembaga kemanusiaan.
Ang rekomendasyon nga akong mahatag mao kini. Kanunayon nato ang maayong relasyon sa atong mga kauban sa gobyerno ug sa uban nga CSOs. Atong ilailahon kinsa kani atong makauban sa atong trabaho ug ang pagpaligon usab sa mga grupo sa taong may kakulian nga isip kasaligan kita nga makiguban kanila. Ug labaw sa tanan, ang paghimo og mga polisiya sa programa aron mapadayon ang kalambuan para sa taong may kakulian.
Jadi perlu membangun networking, perlu membuat suatu program kemanusiaan yang berperspektif sustainable, kemudian perlu melibatkan penyandang disabilitas sebagai orang yang berpartisipasi secara aktif dalam setiap proses pelaksanaan program kemanusiaan.
Good morning, and Bulavinaka from Fiji. I am Saini Militawake, and I am with the Pacific Disability Forum as Manager Inclusive Development. I would like to share with you the work PDF is currently in partnership with the UN Women, particularly the WRD program. So the work with the WRD started 2 years ago. I would also like to say that before that we have been in partnership with UN agencies, particularly the UN Women, in working towards gender equality for women and girls with disabilities. So for WRD program in partnership with the PDF, there is currently work designed on developing a humanitarian strategy for PDF. And as we all know that in the Pacific, we are prone to disasters, and women and girls with disabilities continue to face lots of challenges. This is challenges in accessing evacuation centers, challenges in accessing clean water, challenges in accessing wash facilities, challenges in sexual reproductive health rights, information and services, challenging in acquiring assistive technologies. So these are the various challenges and many more challenges faced by women and girls with disabilities. And we hope that in working together with the WRD program with the UN Women, that our strategy will highlight and articulate the challenges that I've mentioned, and also ways on how to address these challenges through capacity building, advocacy work, raising awareness, partnership, mobilization of resources, monitoring and evaluation, to name a few. Thank you very much.
So colleagues, friends, excellencies, I would like to propose that at this moment, we open the floor for questions. We are a little bit behind time, so we will maybe have an open discussion for about 10 minutes, and then we will proceed to the second part of our panel to hear more insights from our distinguished speakers. So let's maybe start with the room here in Geneva. Please use your microphones, and if you have a specific question to a specific speaker, maybe you can also mention the person, and maybe they can come on the screen. If we don't have any questions in the room, I'm looking around. Yes, please.
Okay, hi. My name is Stephanie Fox. I'm from the EU delegation. I cover humanitarian protection. And my question would be, I guess, to anyone here and joining us online, those who've been involved in the disability rights movement for a while and have been advocating for a disability inclusive approach in development and humanitarian action. What have been key kind of moments since you've been part of this movement, key moments, key milestones, and what are challenges? What are the key challenges that you foresee that need to be tackled moving on? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have maybe another question? And if not, then maybe I will call upon our distinguished panel members online. I believe with the exception of Malak, who had to leave us, we have Abia, we have Atif, we have Gunta, I hope. So Abia, I see you that you would like to take the floor. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the question. I've seen also in the chat as well, the question about the good practices and the address, how we are practically addressing during the humanitarian response. So we have witnessed, as I mentioned earlier, the floods in Pakistan, the earthquake, and it was a huge disasters. And during that time, we took the initiative to talk about the twin track approach. On one hand, talking with the government, national disaster management authorities to see how they can change the policies and include persons with disabilities. And on the other hand, by women with disabilities themselves, they have started the support system that's on the psychosocial support, on providing the peer counseling, guidelines, and giving first-hand knowledge to women and girls with disabilities. They train them how to use the wheelchair, how to go to the toilet, that kind of trainings we have conducted by women with disability. So that kind of like empowering one hand person with disabilities, and on the other hand, the government and the stakeholders and the humanitarian response workers, they received all those trainings to talk about the inclusion of person with disability. And that have created a huge impact. Another example which we have taken that about the inclusion of person with disabilities by identifying their houses and creating a buddy system. So the university students were trained. So they talk about the inclusion of person with disabilities. And once the disaster happened, fortunately, we were able to rescue those persons with disabilities through the buddy system. And they reached out to the point where they have the safe space. But again, it's about systematic changes that we need to create. It's not only one-time intervention, one-time project, one-time activity. We need the huge collaboration with the partners, with the stakeholders, so we can systematically address this gap that is so huge. And I felt like being a woman with disability in the Asia Pacific at the global level, we need to reference the Sendai framework. We need to reference all the legislations that are more inclusive. I'm very honored to receive this award, but I felt like it's a huge responsibility on me, because when we talk about WIN DRR, it's about young girls, more women, more voices to empower so they can be part of the discussion. And I'm really grateful like UNDP is providing that opportunity to thousands of women to understand the need, how we can bring that positive change. Thank you.
Thank you, Abia. I also see Atif's hand up. So Atif, I'm not sure whether you also wanted to respond to this question briefly. Over to you.
Yes, very briefly, as you rightly mentioned. Actually, we, in our experience, we have seen that people with disabilities who are living in the margins of the society, they still are coming up with the social model, or kind of still in the charity mindset. So what we need to include them, we need to build their capacities at the grassroots level on understanding the DRR and humanitarian responses. So we need to prepare people with disabilities, first of all. Secondly, we need to work on the humanitarian side. We need to train humanitarian organizations and authorities in different countries and government bodies to understand disability from the DRR perspective. In that context, I just would like to share one example, like UNICEF is currently working on an e-learning tool for Asian Pacific countries to learn about the disability inclusive DRR. So similar kind of practice can be helpful for including people with disabilities in the DRR planning. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Atif. I would like at this point to ask my online facilitator, who is with us in the room, to bring a question from the floor. As I said, unfortunately, we will not be able to open the floor for participants online. However, we will provide answers to the questions being asked. Claudia, my colleague from UNDP, will read for us one of the questions that has been asked in the chat. Claudia, over to you.
Thank you, Ioana. So Milika asks, could you please provide some good examples from your context of persons with disabilities benefiting from climate resilient actions, especially in places heavily affected by climate change? And she has addressed this to our entire panel. So if anyone would like to raise their hand to answer, we can bring you in on the screen or in person. Thank you.
So anyone on the panel who would like to respond? Alternatively, we do also have a few voices in our panel here in Geneva. So if there's another speaker who would like to take the floor. Ricardo, please, over to you.
Thank you and good morning, everyone. My name is Ricardo and I work for UNHCR. I would like to share only a short story that we received yesterday in commemoration of the International Day of Persons with Disabilities on Sunday. This is a story from Ethiopia, where persons with disabilities, and in particular, one young man called Zakaria, has started a business to bring solar energy to their community. And starting with this, he's dreaming to grow up with this business and start providing a sustainable way of energy in a highly deprived context, as is the area where he's living displaced due to the conflicts in Las Canud area. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Ricardo. I think at this moment, we will move on to the second part of our panel, as we are a little bit behind time. We also have a very exciting part of our event today, which is the award ceremony. So we wouldn't want to sort of jump over that. So Excellencies, colleagues, friends, I would like to invite Her Excellency, Madam Chaudhary, Ambassador and Deputy Permanent Representative in India to the UN. We are honored to have you with us, Excellency. And we are really keen to understand your recommendations regarding strengthening the approaches on disability inclusion, such as those that we have been hearing about today, to increase resilience building efforts. What challenges do we need to confront collectively, and what are the beacons of hope? Over to you.
Thank you so very much. My apologies. Firstly, I've just recovered from a cold, but hopefully that just gives my voice more gravitas. So thank you, Ioana, and thank you, everyone. And of course, thank you to UNDP and to all the organizers for convening today's dialogue and for allowing me this opportunity to be a part of it. I must say personally, it has been very enriching for me to hear all the various views and experiences and perspectives by all the panelists and participants, and understanding a little more about the interlinkages of all the challenges that are a part of this issue. I'll attempt to answer your question by giving you perhaps a few points from the Indian experience, the Indian perspective, but of course from the government's point of view. And as a government, it has been our firm belief that genuine and meaningful inclusion needs targeted legislative as well as policy measures, which not only talk about and think about protecting the rights of persons with disabilities, but they need to have at their heart the principles of respect for inherent dignity, for individual autonomy, and for the independence of persons. And this is why empowerment of people with persons with disabilities has been so central to India's national development agenda. We have an entire department for the empowerment of persons with disabilities, which is a part of a larger ministry. And in terms of numbers, we have estimated about 27 million persons with disabilities in India. And this is what makes it so critical that when you are ensuring access to benefits and also robust delivery, you're able to identify who it is that needs them the most and how do you make sure that it reaches them. And that is why we have implemented, and we are implementing, it's in progress, something called the UDID, which is a Unique Disability Identity Project, which actually issues UDID cards to persons with disabilities, which allows them to then have access to benefits. And so far, 8.5 million UDID cards have already been issued. And in terms of the legislative framework, the two earlier legislations, the 1992 Rehabilitation Act and the 1999 National Trust Act, were bolstered with this very comprehensive Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act in 2016, which provides for non-discrimination, access to justice, community life, protection from abuse, violence, and exploitation. It sets up independent chief commissioners and state commissioners to monitor this implementation and has given it teeth to be able to actually address grievances and complaints in case of any violation of rights. But for me, most importantly, it also provides for affirmative action, including through reservation in government jobs and in admission to government-run and government-aided higher educational institutions. And to share a personal experience I was just mentioning before we started, in the Indian Diplomatic Service, we call the IFS, the Indian Foreign Service, we have a 100% visually impaired diplomat. She is currently our first secretary in our High Commission in Kuala Lumpur. And I must say that in all her interactions, in her public work, there is absolutely, in fact, she's probably more brilliant than many of us because she's had to overcome a lot of, range of challenges which we probably cannot even imagine. And her inclusion in, I would say, the top tier of government service was something which was really quite a beacon of hope, as you were mentioning, for so many more to say that you can't, I mean, in terms of agency, in terms of what you can achieve, it isn't just about being able to survive anything that is thrown at you by life, but also being able to achieve the best of what any person without disabilities can hope to do. In programmatic terms, of course, we have a lot of national institutes with specific needs, people that they are aimed at, and there is about 2.5 million persons with disabilities which are using the facilities at these institutes. We also have about 1.5 million students with disabilities who have been given scholarships. So there are a lot of figures, and the reason I won't talk about them here is because many of this is readily available in the department's website in the public domain. But what for me is important is what happened during COVID and where everybody's life was impacted. But for persons with disabilities, it was far more difficult and they were far more vulnerable. And as a part of the inclusion and empowerment objective, one of the things that I thought I'd speak about is what is called the Sahyogi scheme. Now, Sahyogi is a Hindi word, which depending on the connotation and its use can mean either a helper or an associate or a collaborator. And the whole idea of a Sahyogi scheme is that we established something called Care Associate Cells, CACs, which essentially impart training to create a skilled workforce of care associates. Right? People who can support the community, support the family, support the persons with disabilities to be a part of community life and to be able to, achieve what they are able to achieve without any stigma, without feeling like there is anything being done for them in particular. So a little bit of what I think our colleague from Pakistan was speaking about, the buddy system, and taking it further in terms of ensuring that these are actually professionals or people who've been given some kind of targeted training so that they're able to address the needs. And this was very evident during COVID, where the government also, of course, issued the comprehensive disability inclusive guidelines for that period during the pandemic to assist these care workers to be then able to implement them. And today we've spoken a lot about disaster risk resilience and the intersectionality of gender. And I was thinking about how we have thought about these issues during India's G20 presidency, which ended last week. And I'm happy to share that both of these issues were very high priority for India. In terms of gender, the Prime Minister actually gave a call where it said that we have to move beyond looking at women as beneficiaries of development, and we have to now talk about women-led development and how they are actually the change agents. And in terms of disaster risk resilience, we actually established the G20 working group on DRR, working very closely with the UNDRR. And I'm hoping that this would provide a platform for UNDRR to be able to take forward the mainstreaming of disability inclusion when designing resilience frameworks. And with these very few thoughts, thank you very much once again for giving me this opportunity. And I look forward to hearing the rest of the panelists. Thank you.
Your Excellency, thank you so much. And I think you offered us a lot of beacons of hope. So thank you for all of your insights. I would like now to invite our colleague and friend, Kirsten Lange, who is Program Specialist on Disability Inclusive Humanitarian Action, to also reflect on the humanitarian perspective, as well as bringing forward insights around post-crisis recovery. Kirsten, the floor is open.
Thanks, Joanna, and thank you so much to the organisers of this event for the opportunity to participate. It's been amazing to hear such a diversity of perspectives from across very different regions in the world, so thank you. Now, as we've heard quite a few times today, humanitarian emergencies do provide us with an opportunity to build back better. But for us to be able to realise this opportunity, we need to be thinking about resilience, and we need to be thinking about inclusion even before the onset of an emergency response. What we've learned at UNICEF is that preparedness is really a very key entry point for laying the foundations for an inclusive humanitarian response, which will ultimately result in an inclusive recovery. It's at preparedness, for example, that we have an opportunity for capacity sharing between OPDs and humanitarian actors, and to build those partnerships that are essential to an inclusive response. It's also at preparedness that we can build the systems that are needed to facilitate inclusion, such as ensuring that national social protection systems are ready to scale up in an emergency, or ensuring that inclusive education systems are ready to include newly displaced populations, or for pre-positioning of assistive technology, for example. Ensuring an inclusive response from the onset of an emergency, in addition to requiring disability inclusive preparedness, also requires us to have system-wide change. For disability inclusion to be built into everything that we do, and not to be considered as an add-on, or to be considered as something that is a nice to do in case capacity or resources allow in a humanitarian response. It needs to be really built into everything that we do. So, for example, disability inclusion needs to be integrated into needs assessment processes, into monitoring processes, and into budgeting in order to facilitate a disability inclusive response to be implemented. Communication with affected populations. We need to consider accessibility as a core guiding approach to all communication with affected populations, and that includes in feedback and complaints mechanisms. Now, I think one of the key themes that I hear consistently coming out today is, of course, participation. And that is essential also in humanitarian response. Persons with disabilities, including children and young people, must have opportunities to engage actively as actors in preparedness and response. And what this requires is taking into account accessibility requirements across the diversity of persons with disabilities. We've also heard a few times about intersectionality today. So we need to be ensuring, for example, that approaches to participation are both child-friendly and inclusive for children with disabilities. That we consider, for example, in a very practical sense, language when we're looking at participation by migrants, refugees, and minority groups. I'm going to keep this very brief because I know we have so many more interventions and interesting feedback that I'm really looking forward to hearing. But I just wanted to flag the importance of those few factors in ensuring that we're able to deliver a humanitarian response that is inclusive and that therefore lays the foundations for inclusive recovery. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kirsten. Now I would like to invite, last but not least, our colleague and friend, Ricardo Pla Cordero, Protection Officer at UNHCR. And Ricardo will speak on behalf of UNHCR and UNDRR, who is also present with us online today. Welcome, Ricardo. At UNHCR, you are covering the agenda of the rights of persons with disabilities in situation of displacement. So we were keen to hear from you today. What are your thoughts on how intersectionality should be addressed in resilience building before, during, and after crisis? And specifically, how do we address the specific requirements of underrepresented groups, such as refugees, asylum seekers, and internally displaced persons with disabilities, who actually face higher risks of being left behind? Ricardo, over to you.
Thank you, and thanks to UNDP as well for giving this opportunity to truly ensure that there's no one left behind. As stated by Mr. Filippo Grandi, High Commissioner for Refugees, in his statement to the High Security Council in October, we are facing an unprecedented wave of displacement around the world, with 114 people forcibly displaced as of October alone. 114 is a figure that we haven't faced before. Within this figure, we have approximately more than 18 million of forcibly displaced persons with disabilities. Now, we all know that this group face additional challenges in addition to being already forcibly displaced by conflict and disaster in accessing services, but accessing as well training, resources to build their own resilience. Opportunities may be shared in languages that are known to them. They may have lost the community network or the community support they used to have, and experience difficulties in accessing organizations of persons with disabilities, collaborating with them in their host communities. What we know as of December, and this is thanks to Stephanie Danman and the UNDRR, is what are their views and their willingness to participate in disaster resilience. Together with UNDRR, we are about to share a report on disability, displacement, and disaster resilience, which builds upon an existing report already published earlier this month in December or earlier this year. Is the UNDRR 2023 Global Survey on Persons with Disabilities and Disasters. This is a global survey gathering thousands of responses across the globe on persons with disabilities, and including them as well, people who are forcibly displaced, including asylum seekers, refugees, and internally displaced persons. What we have learned through this report is that among the findings is that indeed this group of forcibly displaced persons with disabilities have less opportunities to participate in disaster resilience. However, they have a higher willingness to be part of these efforts than persons with disabilities from their host communities. This mismatch, or this increased willingness to participate, may be explained by their own experiences and being previously forcibly displaced and having experienced crucial life-threatening events, and all the knowledge that they have accumulated through these experiences make them wanting to participate to help both themselves and the communities that are hosting them. As for example, a quote from an old man who is internally displaced in Syria after the earthquake. He's already saying that he wants to support the community that is hosting them in this new displacement. So just to finalize, I wanted to thanks again the organizers, UNDRR, for this report, adding as well the researchers, Nino Spetadze, and Praditya Perwiti, for their incredible work. And then share a call to action with all stakeholders here, including states, but as well organizations of persons with disabilities. We have seen that the voices of refugees and displaced persons with disabilities are less visible within this community. We see, for example, that from the contest, at least 5 of the 8 finalists are living in context or are coming from context afflicted by conflict. So their willingness is there, their engagement is there. We have as well good practices, and sharing a second example, building on the question shared before from Bangladesh, for example, where we have engagement of CDD, the Center for Disability and Displacement and Development, and CBM engaging refugees, Rohingya refugees as well in disaster resilience efforts. So there is a body of views, good practices, and it's our shared responsibility to build on those. Next week, we have the Global Refugee Forum, which is giving a very tangible opportunity to share pledges, commitments to progress in this area. In climate change, there will be a multi-stakeholder pledge, but there are many other in socioeconomic inclusion, etc., that would be very relevant. With this call to action for everyone to participate and to ensure that refugees and displaced persons are as well included in our efforts, I would like to thank the panel.
Thank you very much, Ricardo. And I think you have beautifully wrapped up our panel discussion. We have 10 more minutes until the end of the session, and we would really not like to go beyond that. So for any questions that the audience have, please let's exchange here in the room in Geneva after the session is finalized. And participants on the online Zoom, please drop your questions on the chat. So with this, I would like to thank our distinguished panelists, our wonderful speakers, and we would like to move to an exciting part of our event today and hand the floor to His Excellency Jeffrey Roach, Chargé d'Affaires from the Permanent Mission of Australia, to announce the winners of our competition. So Your Excellency, the floor is open. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, participants. Thank you, colleagues. Priyanka, lovely to see you at the end of the panel. I'm very sorry to have missed your discussion. I was unfortunately at a UNHCR meeting, which was going over time. This is almost like the Oscars or for the photo competition. So we only have 10 minutes. I'm not going to be long, but I wanted to say that, you know, I've been asked to talk about the 3 top finalists out of the 8 who were shortlisted, but frankly, we have 8 winners already, not 3. So I think that's the first thing to make clear. The second thing is, isn't it wonderful that we are showing these photographs, because it is through art that we construct our narratives about who we are and what our society is. And today we're looking at 8 photos, talking about 8 stories, but we know there's, I don't know, 800,000, or is it 8 million that are actually out there? And what we want is 800,000 or 8 million winners. But today we're just going to talk about 8 photographs. It's a wonderful thing, building inclusive society. Thank you so much to OCHA and UNDP and other participants who brought this mini Oscars together this morning. We're celebrating how do we create resilient, disability inclusive communities, and I'm not sure how the voting has happened, but we have 3 that have come through as from purely a photographic perspective, being the 3. The 3 favourites. The first one that is called the third runner-up. It's a photo. We're going to see them. Wonderful. There we have. The third one is by a Lao photographer, Surya Unavong, from the Lao People's Democratic Republic. It's a photo called "People with Disabilities Enhancing Their Resilience." by using hearing aids to support communication, hearing, and their loved ones. And what we see here is this gorgeous photo of a grandfather with a hearing impairment, but he can communicate by using a hearing aid. So he's connected with his family. For Sulia and for the translators, interpreters, you'll hate me for this, but for Sulia, hoi nindi tujak tan, khopchai lalai sumsui for your photograph today. It's a beautiful one. The second runner-up photo is by Banung Un U from Cambodia. In the bottom left as we're looking at it. I just love the way we're seeing I don't know if it's a mother or grandmother with her daughter or granddaughter, but there's something beautiful going on there in terms of between generations and the connections. And we all know how vital family is to our communities. And what we have here is this young girl who's deaf. She's joining a Cambodian Sign Language along with her mum via an online platform. I think that's a great portrait of tradition and technology captured in one, so thank you. Then the first runner-up is a photograph by Salem Aligurk from Syria. The photo's title is Celebrating Resilience and Sustainability, a craft exhibition for the blind in Idlib. Here we have a young man sewing a basket, traditional basket, that's been organised by the Shafak organisation's Makani Community Centre. And I love the way it loops around that we're seeing here art, trade, crafts, connecting with photography. And it's almost the full cycle of what does arts mean and what does arts mean. It's about our narratives. So thank you very much for the opportunity to come in at the very end of your panel to be your compere for 8 minutes, and I'll pass the floor back. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. So here on the screen, we have the Public's Choice, which is actually our third runner-up. It seems that our participants online and in the room preferred this photo of a family coming together. So thank you very much. I would also like to invite my online facilitators to spotlight our photographers who submitted some of these runner-up photos. Unfortunately, we will not be able to continue the discussion, but it's a pleasure and an honor to have you with us today. And the photographs that we have exhibited in this event today are also available on a digital exhibition, of which the link we will share with everyone. And we have also prepared a photo story of the 8 finalist photographs for this competition. Thank you very much for being with us today. It's been a pleasure. And again, thank you, Excellency, for having walked us through this beautiful ceremony. And now I would like to hand over to Ms. Agi Veres, our UNDP Geneva Director, for closing remarks for this event. Agi, over to you.
Thank you very much. And I'm really glad that we managed to have our discussions, even though a little bit short on the discussion with the audience, because I think, all of these contributions were bringing a different perspective. We have heard from the policy perspective how important to have that kind of policy level framework and support from the governments. We heard from the organizations who I think, one of the key messages I took away from that is how important it is to have the involvement in the processes and the solutions of persons living with disabilities. And this ties back a little bit what I started with, that we can really achieve meaningful inclusion if the entire process is inclusive, and if not just a process on focusing on people living with disabilities, but on all processes involving them and other vulnerable groups into the solutions that we're applying. Our discussion was a little bit focused on disaster risk reduction, just because that's where we had a lot of the experiences and the organizations participating. But I really want to point out that what we're trying to promote and advocate for is focusing on inclusion and resilience building in a larger scope. And this is kind of like a snapshot of certain good practices and certain areas where we have made some progress. But at the same time, we really want to look at a much broader spectrum when it comes to the topic. And thank you really for our co-sponsors for the panelists, especially for the permanent missions who really came and supported this particular event. And I want to emphasize again that this event is really launching, hopefully, a series of dialogues, but also linking to the actions on the ground so that we can have some tangible understanding on what's going on. Our difficulty with some of these dialogues is, especially in Geneva, is that we are sitting in a room in Geneva and we're really trying to understand what's happening in the field in these countries, what's happening in conflict situations, in disaster situations, when we're responding with humanitarian actions, and of course, development and peace building as well. And the reason I really like this photo exhibition, and we will continue hopefully on this, is exactly because it's giving a visual story. As you said, through art or through these visual stories, we have a little bit of a better connection and understanding what are these difficulties that people face every day when they are trying to respond in a resilient way. And that helps us understand what we can do to support them and how we can support them, because sometimes the intent is there and the actions are there, but the how is not always responding the best possible way of what could really help with the inclusion. So with that, we managed to close exactly on time, because the worst is to lose our audience because everybody has to run to the next meeting. So I really want to thank again all our co-sponsors, all our panelists to support the event, and all of you participating. We had, I think, over 100 people online, and we will definitely share the outcomes of our discussions and continue this dialogue with all of you. Thank you very much.